Hello everyone and welcome back. Today's video is going to be a big update on a bunch of projects I've made in the past several months. First, I'm going to clean out the tiny pond riparium. I first trimmed back some of the terrestrial plants growing out of the water area. The purple wandering Jew is just getting too tall to look very nice. Trimming off live portions of plants will encourage new growth. That way, I can also use the leftover cuttings in other projects. The purple waffle plant grew quite a bit too, but not nearly as much as the wandering Jew did. Now I'm going to start cleaning the water area. I pulled out the one bladder snail I could see and started pulling a bunch of hair algae and duckweed out. I kept this little dish nearby for anything I don't need and can just compost. I also cut an older dying leaf off of the purple waffle plant. I also cut off a couple of pieces of the lilac branches that I didn't like the look of anymore. Then I continued to pull hair algae, duckweed, plant roots, leaf litter, and other stuff out of the water area. Then I tried to clean off the glass. There's a lot of algae, dead duckweed, and other slimy stuff on it. Here's what the water area looked like after I mostly cleaned it out. I also pulled out some more pieces of leaf litter before siphoning out the rest of the water and other stuff with this 1/8-inch thick airline tube. Then I got a few cuttings of purple waffle plant from the Betta's 5-gallon aquarium. I snapped off any old or dead leaves and then used tweezers to press the cuttings into the substrate. Then I poured in a few pea pebbles. Then I filled the riparium back up to the top with dechlorinated tap water. Now I'm adding a small cutting of Galaxy False Aurelia. This is a type of stiff woody plant that in my opinion looks great with a purple waffle plant, but I have no idea if it'll work well in this environment or not. This is a bunch of leftover material from the original plants in the riparium or any new cuttings I added. It also includes a bunch of hair algae and duckweed and stuff like that. Then I grabbed these 2 bladder snails from the small cup of pond material. The small one is the snail I took out of the riparium just a little bit ago, and the big one is a new one that I brought from my pond outside. I added 3 more bladder snails from my Betta's 5-gallon aquarium. Now there are at least 5 snails in total in the riparium. Then I grabbed various types of duckweed from another small cup of pond water, this time a different one. So yeah, I guess I have cups of pond water sitting all over the place. Then I added this unidentified seed pod, and then used wire cutters to break another one up into small pieces and added them to the riparium also. These seed pods are very heavy, so they sink underwater without having to soak them or anything. I really like how this riparium turned out the second time, and I'll try to do water changes and other maintenance to keep it clean this time. Next, we have the giant Streamside Pallidarium. This one still isn't doing very well in the water area. Not much has changed with this Pallidarium since my last update, but some of the terrestrial plants have grown a lot, and I've added several more lately. And yes, that tall plant in the middle there is Creeping Charlie. Any plants that are fully or partially submerged in the water area always just die and fall apart. That's why the large terrestrial plants are doing fine, but any mosses and liverworts or fully aquatic plants I've added are just submerged too much and always die. I just found a container that will work great, so pretty soon I plan on redoing this Pallidarium completely. Next, the Skyscraper Mountain Terrarium. I haven't been maintaining this terrarium really at all, except at first when I built it, I sprayed it with water a couple of times. It eventually got too dry and most of the mosses and liverworts completely died off, but the Ficus pumila went crazy in it. Also, this thin sheet of cork is peeling off the base. I have no idea what I want to do with this terrarium, but until then, I'll just keep it. Next, the Cactus Garden Bowl. For whatever random reason, I suddenly started calling this cactus Bob the Cactus. That's just my special nickname for it. This cactus has hardly grown at all, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, but it hasn't died either. Now we have the original Streamside Pallidarium. The mosses and liverworts have grown a lot in here. So has hair algae in the water area. I'm not really sure what I want to do with this Pallidarium eventually, but I am going to trim out a few of those liverworts for something later. Next, the mini mountain Pallidarium bowl. There is a lot of hair algae and java moss growing in the water area. I don't like the look of this Pallidarium much anymore, and I never really did, which is why I'm going to redo it in this glass bowl. First, I poured in about 1 inch of pea pebbles and then 1 inch of play sand. The pebbles should help stop the wood from sinking into the sand too far. Then I grabbed the piece of wood in the original Pallidarium and pulled it out along with all of the algae and everything. Then I removed the algae and moss that was growing on the wood below the waterline. At first I tried to cut it off with scissors, but later decided it would be easier to just pull it off. Then I pressed it into the sand in the new container. time, I do want the wood to be submerged a little bit more than before, so hopefully it'll soak up water to the top better. Once I got the piece of wood situated just right, I poured more play sand around it. Then I filled it up with dechlorinated tap water. For some reason, there was a lot of oil floating on top of the water, so I tried to soak up most of it. Then I added those liverworts that I took out of the Streamside Pallidarium earlier. Then I added springtails to help control any mold that might grow. Then I added various types of duckweed, again from some random cup of pond water I found sitting in my room. Lastly, I decided to take out this mostly dead piece of moss and replace it with more liverworts. I really like how this Pallidarian turned out the second time. In fact, when I thought of this idea first back in July of last year, this is what I wanted it to be like, but I couldn't find the container that was just right. Now for the newly remade Cactus Terrarium. This time the cacti are doing much better than the first ones did when I originally made this. Except for this really tiny one. It's probably the new substrate that helped keep the big ones alive this time. This time the substrate has a lot more dirt-like material, which probably helped. Because when I first built this terrarium, the substrate was mostly pea pebbles and pieces of bark, things that most plants just have trouble growing in. I think steep desert landscapes look very interesting, but they're just hard to make, or at least hard to keep together, since rocks and sand don't stay up on a slope very well. Now we have the terrarium with no opening. The moss and Ficus pumila have both really grown a lot in here. This will be a very interesting and weird terrarium to try to do some maintenance on. When I take the lid off of the bottom, the knitting mesh cup is in the way. I would have to get it out somehow without ruining everything, and then get in to cut the plants back. Next, we have the Saltwater Jar Ecosphere. Obviously, this ecosphere still has some problems. I still have no idea what to do with this thing. I could redo it with different materials, redo it with the same materials, clean it out really well, make something completely new in it. I could do anything with it. I'm just still not sure what I want to do. Next, my Betta's 5-gallon Blackwater aquarium. The old light on the aquarium suddenly stopped working when I was doing some maintenance on it, so I used this little USB powered light to hopefully keep the plants alive until I get a new big light. By the time you're watching this video, I have already gotten a new light for the aquarium and it's working well for it. You may have noticed earlier that the plants at the top are looking really dark, and that's why. Despite all of this, the betta and most of the plants in the aquarium are all doing quite well. A lot of the plants in here have grown a lot since I first built the aquarium, but especially the ones growing out of the top. Lately, I've also just been growing out some different types of wandering Jew plants in here, because pretty soon I plan on redoing this aquarium completely in an old 10-gallon aquarium I just got. Lastly, the one you've probably all been waiting for, my new 1-gallon Reef Aquarium. I actually redid the hardscape and macroalgae in this aquarium since I wasn't quite pleased with how it turned out the first time. I simply pulled out the rocks and macroalgae, made sure none of the animals were in the way, and then poured in some more play sand. Then I siphoned out some more of the water to make it easier to work in.
I picked up a shell. Look at me. I'm funny.
I placed the piece of live rock back in the aquarium, but then took it back out right away since I decided I wanted to super glue some rocks together. I simply created a small cave structure out of the piece of live rock and 2 pieces of dry rock. Then I pressed some play sand into the glue to give it a more seamless look. Even though the glue is already plenty strong to hold the rocks together, the sand embedded in the glue will probably make it a little bit stronger. The glue wouldn't stick to the live rock, so I put it in separate from the 2 pieces of dry rock, which stuck together quite well. To further strengthen the dry rock structure, I glued small pieces in between the big pieces. Then I placed most of the pieces of Callirpa racemosa back in the aquarium. Then I filled the aquarium back up with salt water and cleaned off the glass. Now I like the hardscape much more than when it was set up the first time. If I add a small goby fish or shrimp sometime, it'll have a cave to live in now. The coral has actually been doing really well in here. It's definitely not recommended to keep coral in an aquarium this small since conditions can change much faster in a small volume of water than a large one. But it's working great so far. Also, I see that a lot of green algae has grown on the dry rock since when I first set up the aquarium. I'm really glad to see that everything is growing and becoming established quite well. Anyways, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this update video and would like to see more like it. Please leave a comment if you have any ideas, comments, or questions for me, and I'll see you in the next one.